Yep. All right, folks. Sorry, it's usually I usually know where I am in the building. Welcome this morning. It's a wonderful turnout for a Saturday morning. For a meeting that's incredibly important for our community, and not just this community, folks, but the province in its whole. Because if we're not united, then we're very divided, and we've become very, very weaker as separate pieces. So thank you for caring. Thank you for caring about Nova Scotia. Thank you for caring about West Hampton as well. Let's start the day off by acknowledging that we are in the such government in the territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and that these lands are governed by a treaty of peace and friendship signed in 1726. We are all treated people and have responsibilities to each other at this land. It's also important to recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose history, legacy, and contribution have enriched that part of Mi'kmaq and Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Somebody asked me the other day, why do you keep on giving the land acknowledgement and recognizing that African Nova Scotians? Well, we originate from this land and the original peoples of this land, so we have to remember our history. We have to remember where we came from and how we ended up here today. If we don't, then it's all or nothing. A huge thank you to these fine folks up here for organizing today, for all of our Sorry to have my back to you, but I'm going to choose one way or another. And to all of you for being here, all of our elected folks, and everybody that's interested. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I would invite Lisa LaChance, please. Lisa is, hold on. Lisa's, okay. Thanks, Lisa. Lisa's my new friend.
We're some new friends through this fight, which is the best way of organizing, right? So I'm Lisa LaChance. I'm the MLA for Halifax, Little Single Island, and I'm the Nova Scotia NDP Natural Resources spokesperson. I'm also here today with my colleague Paul Wasing, who's the MLA for Saskatchewan, and bringing regards from Claudia Tender, who's our leader. I am amazed and inspired by the group, the organizing, the turnout on a Saturday morning. We have been in this fight against this draconian approach to thinking about resource exploration since we got wind of it, like you. We were surprised after the election. We fought it in the House. We know that this is not the way to make decisions, and people feel really upset, excluded, concerned, but it is so great to see people turning out and organizing, and this is such an important issue for us to keep fighting on. And so, I think I'm only going to say a couple things because I'm on the way to Kettle Pride, if you hadn't figured that out. So we're going to go through that too. But I think even though the RFP process closed without any bids, I think there's so much left to be concerned about. And I think you all know that. That's why you're here. But some of the things that I'm really concerned about and keeping an eye on, and asking for answers and fighting against when I can. So they're in the spring legislative session, in addition to the bill and the law that took away the moratorium on uranium exploration, there were also two other laws that were passed that actually make it easier for businesses, for organizations, and government to access the surface part of your land. And so I'm very concerned about how that is going to play out in the context of all of this. So one about temporary access for, a through fare for a project, but also access to your land, like the surface part of your land. I have valley roots. I have a lot down in the valley. I'm equally concerned about all of this. I think most Nova Scotians are very rigorous, but that's a huge concern to me. They also just changed the regulations for how large-scale mining projects can be approved. And so now it's actually that you can do it sort of like step by step, which we know is kind of not what we want, right? Lampshires, and they wouldn't have to have done a First Nations consultation before getting started. So that's another recent last week change to be concerned about. And then the other piece I'm concerned about is the Mining Association of Nova Scotia is advocating that we have one department in charge of identification, promotion, and regulation of mining. And I think if you look at the Westbury inquiry, there's a very specific recommendation 52, that says that's not the way we should have, we need diffuse regulation and monitoring of these activities. And so I think that's a really important one to keep an eye on as well. So those are some things that I'll be looking at. I look forward to hearing from folks after this meeting. I'll be out as much as I can to community meetings, and I wish you well for your organizing. Next week for Windsor Pride, I'm actually not able to come, but my colleague Paul will be here. So you'll see him again for Windsor Pride, or Hants County Pride. And we'll be with all of you every step of the way.
And good day at Pride. I also have a statement here from the Liberal MPs Derek Marquette and Ian Rankin that they wanted me to read to you today. We want to begin by thanking the organizers for the opportunity to share a few words, and we're sorry we can't be with you in person today. Like many of you, we are deeply concerned by the Eastern government's decision to lift the ban on uranium mining in Nova Scotia. This move was done backwards, without any meaningful consultation with communities, and without providing the evidence needed to show that uranium mining can be done safely in our province. There has been no proof brought forward that would reassure residents, especially in areas like this one, where there are a large number of people who rely on well water, and where there are weather patterns that could increase the risk of contamination spread. Instead of engaging with Nova Scotians, the government rushed ahead with a decision that feels more like a distraction from their lack of real economic growth plan than it does a genuine strategy for growth. We voted against this legislation in the spring, and we will continue to raise your concerns with the government. Please keep making your voices heard. Write to your MLA, who also serves as the ministerial assistant to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Your advocacy matters and could make a difference. We hope to visit this area soon to speak with many of you directly. Thank you again for the chance to be part of this important discussion. So, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming today. It's been really inspiring seeing this community come together. We did feel that after our fire hall meeting in Vaughan a few weeks ago, actually maybe 3 weeks ago now, that there were going to be potential impacts on Windsor and surrounding areas. This isn't just our neighborhood, it's all of our neighborhoods. So we're here to bring attention to that, and thank you for coming. I'd like to keep things respectful and have a healthy dialogue here today. So we'll have some presenters, we'll show you a slideshow, and then we'll have a question and answer period. The reason we're holding this meeting today is because the act of rescinding the ban on uranium that has been in place for 44 years caught all of us off guard. It was done without any consultation with our First Nations, without any community feedback, and without any transparency from the provincial government. We've asked for information from the provincial government on several levels. Many have taken many avenues, and we've not received any information from them with regards to the how is this safe, because that's what they're saying. What methods will be used for exploration, fracking, in situ, open pit, for the exploration part, and then when is this going to be done? Why is this even a conversation in a place like Nova Scotia, where we have so many rural communities, and our communities rely on water from their wells? We do have a WARE, which we'll speak about, and that is the RFP, Request for Proposal Areas. My point is that we've had zero dialogue, and we need everybody to get informed that might be affected, and it's been left up to us to do that. I firstly also want to thank everybody that has circled petitions through the community, who's written letters to our MLAs, and organized town halls across the province. For those of you who have been taking time out of your busy schedules to become informed, and thank you for being here. I also want to thank our municipal councillors for taking this seriously and asking our government for a pause until we can gather all of the pertinent information. I also want to thank our speakers today who've been putting an incredible amount of work on this issue and sharing that information with the public. My name is Sarah Trask, and my husband built our home on Falls Lake 3 years ago, right across from the Millbrook area. I love living here. I love this beautiful province, the lakes and rivers and the beaches, and forests. I love our cultural identity. From agriculture to tourism, wineries and fisheries, we buy our meat from our farmer down the road and grow my own vegetables. I love seeing the kids in my daughter's school, going to the waterfalls, jumping off the cliff, and enjoying all of the lakes that surround our area. I'm a mom, a wife, and a community volunteer. And I've been leading path practicing for 18 years. I'm not an environmental expert or an activist, nor am I part of any special interest group, and I usually vote based on my local candidates who can do best work in our communities. And I voted for Melissa Sheehy-Burchard because she did a wonderful job after the floods. She seemed to be somebody who would listen. I wish she was here today, but alas. I'm speaking to this because this is not a political issue. This is a human issue. On March 21st, the government announced a request for proposal for uranium exploration in the backyard, in our backyard, and the backyards of many of you. Smack dab in the middle of cottage country. I know they mine for uranium in northern Saskatchewan, but our house, and the houses of all of my neighbors, are right next to where they want to mine. None of it makes any sense. I think, how can they possibly think this is a good idea? I'm all for economic development, but at what cost? At the cost of destroying the beauty that surrounds us? What if we tapped into the youth of this province? What if we offered the government solutions, encouraged innovation, and taught kids about that innovation? What if we invested in these innovative ideas? What if we invested in agriculture so we could feed ourselves? Year-round hothouses, invested in tourism. Would we need to dig an open pit mine in the middle of the province where people live with their children and their grandchildren? My husband and I, about a month ago, attended a meeting in East Dalhousie run by Colby Solar, who helped us set up today. Thank you, Colby, and his mother, Megan, who's been very helpful. We've been liaising with Ecology Action Centre, the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and the Council of Canadians, including those who have worked on the original moratorium and ban in Nova Scotia that has been in a safe place for 44 years. When we first learned of this happening in Vaughan, we thought, oh crap, this is our backyard. And as we've done our research, and we've spent the last month looking deeper and deeper into this, careful consultation with experts across the province, the impact keeps growing and spreading. We are looking at harming our municipality, our farms, our watershed, our food supply, our province. Chad and I and so many others have been asking, please tell us how this is safe, how this is going to help our province. We've gotten no answers. I personally have heard from many of you, farmers, business owners, teachers, and neighbors, there is a lot of concern and stress in our community. People have received notices already of uranium exploration on their property from the Provincial Department of Natural Resources. The health impacts of a proposed project like this begin way before the project even begins, and that is in the fear and the stress that it causes, especially when people feel like they're in the dark, not listened to, not informed, and their very way of life, their homes, their children's health, and their environment feels threatened. These are the voices that I've been listening to, and it's heartbreaking. What gives me hope is that I've never seen more people activated on any issue in all of my life than this. This crosses political party lines. This includes all communities and stakeholders across this province coming together. And that's why I believe you're here. We need to share solutions and ideas, lean on each other, teach each other with one shared goal, to bring back the ban and protect the future of our land, air, water in Nova Scotia. Sorry, my slides have a mind of their own. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers today, which I'll introduce as we go along. But I'm going to do a brief history of mining for uranium in Nova Scotia. So exploration for uranium recycling process. Exploration for uranium was already done in Millet Brook beginning in the summer of 1976. This was not the first stage of exploration for uranium. There were 2 times that the province evaluated the risks versus benefits of uranium in the 1980s, followed by a moratorium that continued to be extended. Then again through the voluntary planning process in 2008, a ban was decided upon due to risk to communities. The Uranium Exploration and Mining Prohibition Act received royal assent on November 5, 2009, codifying the ban into law. The ban remained in effect until its repeal on March 26, 2025. So what's been happening since? In mid-June this month, 5 wonderful municipalities passed motions similar to the one West Hants passed on June 10th. And they were that. We asked for motions where they would ask the provincial government to put a pause on granting any leases until proper consultation can be had to weigh up the risks. Seems reasonable. Pictou County, West Hants, Annapolis County, Lunenburg County, and Pictou Town. And I will add that West Hants also passed a motion that they will look at protecting our watershed. On June 11th, the next day, a letter was sent to each of the municipalities from the Premier's office outlining where the money is spent, listing all of the programs the provincial government helps to fund in these communities, and inadvertently threatening to remove them unless they fall in line. I've seen the letter. It was awful. Programs like Ground Search and Rescue, 911, Dykeland Lodge. On June 12, 2025, prospectors would be decided, but as announced, no proposals were presented, and the Houston government insists on moving forward at a later date, as stated in a press conference. On June 19th, Buddy Fraser, who will be speaking today, received a phone call from West Hants MLA, Melissa Sheedy-Bouchard, asking for access to his land to test wells and explore for uranium, which he can speak to. As we can see, this has all been happening swiftly and silently, and this province could even grant licenses as early as July 11th in a few short weeks. Nova Scotia has a history of exploration and mining infractions. Which have led to communities suffering the impacts and a province with a responsibility to clean up the mess left behind. In the case of Atlantic Gold, 23 provincial regulations were broken and 3 federal regulations. There are many examples. Westrag, Harrietsfield, the list is lengthy. I am not against mining, but this has to be done safely. That being said, uranium is vastly different than exploring for other minerals. We know this. Uranium exploration and mining are not only dangerous, but they leave us behind a legacy of harm. Uranium is radioactive. That's what makes it dangerous. It breaks down into radon, the gas that is known to be hazardous to health. Uranium is soluble, dissolves in water, and is known to be hazardous to the health. We understand, and it travels long distances. We understand from a source familiar with mining exploration practices that the next stage of exploration to further evaluate the resource could involve a significant disturbance of uranium. Millet Brook on Hants County is a 2,300 hectare area equivalent to 5,683 acres and is the largest and most densely populated proposed site. It is an area with many surface water sources such as lakes, streams, waterfalls, ponds, and can have potential implications on our water supply. It is less than 8 kilometers from Windsor's designated water supply and less than 5 kilometers from Falmouth's designated water supply. This area is populated with full-time residents, families, and cottage owners. The watershed contains many farms with both food and livestock. The attached map shows the proposed uranium lease area. Water flows from the RFP area would flow through hundreds of properties, farms, wineries, and schools before reaching the Avenue River and Minas Basin. It is becoming clear that not only did this government not evaluate the risks specific to Nova Scotia, high rainfall, extreme weather events, acidic water, and proximity to populated areas, but they did not evaluate the site-specific risks. All three RFP areas are in rural watersheds where people rely on wells, have wetlands, brooks, rivers, lakes that all drain into bodies of water imperative to commercial fisheries, one of the province's key industries. East Dalhousie is part of the Le Havre River watershed and flows into the Atlantic. River John watershed into the Northumberland Strait. And as we mentioned, Minas Basin, Millet Brook, flowing into, the Minas Basin. Even more striking, I'm sure you all remember the devastating flash flood we had in 2023, where lakes and rivers overflowed, water poured down into the Windsor floodplain, can you imagine that this was carrying radioactive material? That's one mistake. One mistake has to be made. Let's remember, there is no point in exploring for uranium if uranium mining is too great risk. Why explore if we can't have a mine? It's time to look at these issues now, not later, before any harm is done. Brian Goffey is a retired certified health physicist who worked as Health Canada's Atlantic Region radiation specialist. He says, because of uranium solubility in water, disturbance of uranium-contaminated rock caused by exploration and mining has the potential to increase both uranium and radon levels. These risks increase exponentially by mining activities because they take place in the areas of highest concentration over the largest area. We can't understand how the government arrived at this idea. Considering uranium exploration in an area like ours, filled with many bodies of water in the middle of cottage country, and a watershed that flows into the Minas Basin. When the McLeod Commission was looking into whether a moratorium on uranium exploration and mining should be continued in Nova Scotia, Environment Canada said, the release of radioactive matter into the environment presents a special class of environmental protection problems, because radiation cannot, in any known practical sense, be neutralized or altered from its natural decay sequence, and it can cause permanent, cumulative, or delayed but irreversible harmful effects in all living organisms. End quote. So it's not the same as mining for other minerals. I keep seeing people saying, dig, dig, dig. I just think these people don't know enough about how uranium works. Therefore, radioactive materials would require containment during their hazardous lifetime to allay health and environmental concerns, so that provincial government would be responsible for the cleanup and containment, our tax dollars. In Nova Scotia, the wet climate, high water table, and generally acidic waters may pose special problems for radioactive waste management. The Houston government says new techniques mean that uranium can be mined safely. Okay, where is this information? Why has it not been shared with the West? And we have all asked. Information from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency from 2025 says something quite different. The EPA says new mining technology does not make uranium mining safe. According to the EPA, regardless of how uranium is extracted from rock, mining, or in situ leaching, the process leaves behind radioactive waste. These processes separate uranium from its decay products, which are also radioactive and actually contain most, 80 to 90% of the radioactivity of rock or ore. The Houston government repeatedly tells us that mining can be done safely, uranium mining can be done safely in Nova Scotia, but has not provided any evidence to support their statement. There has been no evaluation of risks or the specific selected RFP sites before or after the government repealed this ban. Dr. Steve Emmerman is a scientist, geophysicist, a retired university professor, now a mining consultant, who has testified on mining issues before the U.S. Congress, the European Union, the United Nations, and represented clients across countless mining cases around the world. Over the phone from his home in Utah, Emmerman told a reporter in Nova Scotia, the Halifax Examiner, that the ban on uranium mining in Nova Scotia should stay in place, and that among other things, the high precipitation in the province alone should preclude safe uranium exploration or mining. He says, I would support keeping the ban. He says, I would not recommend uranium mining under any circumstances. Potential impacts on watersheds affect all of our lives, our economy, our future. Is it smart to take chances without evaluating potential harm? This doesn't just affect our area. This could have devastating impacts on the entire province. I think about Nova Scotia, the quality of life we enjoy here, our industries, tourism, fisheries, wineries. It's pretty awesome, hey? We could lose these very quickly with one mistake with uranium. Water is life. This is our children, your children, and your grandchildren's futures. I'm a firm believer in solutions. We just need really smart, creative ways to encourage development that promotes self-responsibility. Please help us find better ways forward for this province. We need your help. We need innovative ways for industry and development that protects our watersheds, our environment, our forests, and sustains life, not an industry like uranium that could potentially turn this province into a radioactive ghost town. Here are some things that here are some confirmed endangered at-risk animals in the Vaughan area. And a list of things that you can do. So you can contact your MLA or MP, and don't just stop at one letter, please. Keep writing, keep sending. They are listening, they're just not responding. They hear our voices, so it's very important that you communicate with them and address your concerns. Raise awareness and share information, just like what you're doing today by being here. But use social media. We have a Facebook page called Citizens Against Uranium Exploration and Mining in Nova Scotia. A lot of really great information is shared on there. Print posters and signs, put up signs in your yard, create visibility. Also understand the current situation. Read the latest news and reports. Keep up to date. Engage with experts. Consult with environmental scientists and other experts to gain a deeper understanding of the issue. Donate. We have begun the process of starting a legal fund and have spoken with a lawyer. So that's basically all the information we can give you now. But if you want to become a plaintiff, join our board of directors, join our not-for-profit in the coming weeks and get yourself under there. You can also donate through the GoFundMe towards legal fees. Join a committee. We've set up a table at the back where if you have any interest in getting involved and becoming activated, sign up for something that you're passionate about. Now I would like to hand it over to Chad, and he is going to show you a video.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah's put a lot of work into this. I'd just like to thank her for having a little MIA this week in some meetings, so she put a lot of work into this event.
In its natural state, uranium can...
Yeah, so guys, just as you don't know, me, Chad Monche, grown up here my whole life, like Sarah. Hit the ground running on this because, again, it's we've got property in the backyard there. We have a local business here. It's this area is everything to me. Love the residents, love the area. It's home, and we've had countless people reach out to us, just scared or stressed about this, and it's something that's going to impact the whole province, not just our area, and we had to get involved with it. But we're going to show a couple clips from the movie Uranium. It was produced by the National Film Board. Movies in the 80s, but it's a case study basically on that this type of operation has been done before in a developed area that was a boom town for uranium, and the impacts on that community were absolutely devastating, basically in a ghost town from the mining operations there. Majority of the population poisoned the local First Nations, poisoned the animals, had a huge impact on everybody there, the miners. There's still people dying every day from the impacts of the radiation there. So I encourage everyone here to watch it for free on their website. They got posted free. Just Google Uranium and International Film Board is the first link. These are a couple short clips, but the whole video is well worth a look. This picture's worth 1,000 words, and it really shows what these mining operations are like. And not much has changed. Despite what they keep telling you, not much has changed in mining uranium since then. I have not seen, as Sarah said, any information put forward to suggest that it's any safer than it was back then. So, let's Sarah.
Gives off atomic radiation for billions of years. Normally, the Earth shields us from most of these harmful rays. But when the rock is brought to the surface and crushed, that protective shield is lost. Undetectable by any human sense, atomic radiation penetrates living cells and disrupts their internal functions, often damaging them beyond repair. Elliott Lake, Ontario, is one of Canada's nuclear capitals. Since the mid-1950s, these mines have supplied uranium, first for atomic bombs, and later to generate electricity. For every barrel of usable product that leaves the mill, tons of solid and liquid waste are dumped on site. The sand-like tailings far more radioactivity than the extracted uranium. They contain a dozen radioactive byproducts, as well as heavy metals, acids, and other chemicals dangerous to animal and human life. If mining continues at 1988 production levels, the industry will have dumped 300 million tons by the end of the century. Fallout from radioactive gas given off by the tailings will accumulate in vegetation for thousands of years to come. They are candidates for slow bombs. Unless they can be perfectly contained, contaminants from the Elliott Lake mines will continue to migrate down the Serpent River and into the Great Lakes. 80 kilometers downstream from the mines lies the Serpent River Indian Reserve.
I'll just count that one there, but it does go on to show the impact on the native reserve down the road. It's disastrous, but there's time to flip to another quick clip about the Key Lake mine in Nova Saskatchewan, which is still active today. And this will show some information on spills they had back then. But they just, in 2019, had another spill, 50,000 liters of contaminated water were discharged into the local river system. There's a small community up there of mostly Indigenous members that doesn't get a lot of media coverage. It should in poisoning of what it is. But in an area like Nova Scotia, the impacts of that would be absolutely devastating. So sort of focus.
Key Lake in northern Saskatchewan is the richest operating uranium mine in the world. The richer the ore, the more radioactive the wastes. This equation presents a serious challenge. A vice president of the Key Lake Mining Corporation, Joe Anderson.
As I mentioned, 30 years ago, there was not the same consciousness about environment as there is today. Of course, we also didn't have the same regulations as we do today. Now we have the regulations, and Key Lake as a company and as a good corporate citizen adheres to the regulations and tries to beat them quite a bit.
The Key Lake mine opened in 1983. Within months, it was high profile on CBC's television news.
Okay, when the Key Lake mine began production in October, it was called state-of-the-art, high-tech controls, the best equipment available. The mining company promised to shield the 450 workers from radiation and to protect the freshwater lakes that surround the mine. To get at the ore, the company had to drain a lake. That lake became the open pit mine. Water still seeps into the pit where it's contaminated by uranium. It's pumped into a plastic-lined reservoir and later is used in the milling process. The mill had been shut down over Christmas, but water was still building up in the reservoir. There was no monitor to warn of high water levels, and it was too dark and icy to see.
One of the mill operators said the first they'd heard about it that they were working night shift and they were having supper about 12:30 at night, and the foreman comes in and looked very worried. He says, "We've got trouble, we've got a spill."
These are the first pictures of the spill. They were taken at dawn on January 5th by a miner. The water broke through the reservoir and was still rushing out. 100 million liters of radioactive water washed out of the road and drained into a small lake. The water is polluted with radium, which is known to cause bone cancer. Workers built dikes to keep the spill from spreading. While the January 5th spill is getting most of the attention, it was soon learned there had been 8 other radioactive spills at the mine. Smaller spills by comparison, but spills just the same. The president of Key Lake Mining accepts responsibility, but he says there's no reason for concern.
As an environmental hazard, or as an environmental any impact it has, it's a non-event.
Critics say it may be too late to stop the radioactive water from getting into the northern river systems. But the biggest concern is how those spills could have happened at all, and what's been called the world's safest uranium mine. For the Journal, I'm David Kyle in Saskatoon.
Effective uranium waste disposal would mean safe containment of radioactive substances for at least 200,000 years. Such a system does not yet exist, despite industry claims to state-of-the-art technologies. At Clough Lake, concentrated radioactive wastes were stored for a time in concrete containers intended to last a century. Within 6 years, hundreds were leaking.
Even if there weren't these dramatic failures that put paid to the idea that things are so much better now, you would still have the long-term consequences to deal with. For example, the regulatory bodies have determined that in Saskatchewan, they will allow the burial of rather highly radioactive tailings, that is, as tailings go relatively high radioactivity, in a manner which will not last beyond 50 years at the very outside. So that essentially when we're talking state-of-the-art, we're talking state-of-the-art to protect us, but not state-of-the-art to protect future generations.
So we see a lot of similarities there between all the promises of politicians and mining companies and the actual results. And that's the scary thing of all this. They make all the promises they want, but it takes one event, and you saw how many events there. One of these events would devastate our whole region. I mean, this is material lasts tens of thousands of years, so it's just wanted to present that, and I think it does a good job showing the realities and dangers.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you people. I speak from the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, and I also belong to a physicians group, International Physicians to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or to prevent nuclear war. I am here today to tell you how uranium and its decay products, when removed from the ground, will spread into the environment by wind, water, and potentially even smoke. I will tell you how this affects the human body. I was peripherally involved in the work that led up to the 2009 ban. This legislation was carefully designed to protect our health and the health of the environment. It grew out of long-standing moratorium and resulted from extensive research and public engagement. In the end, it garnered support from all political parties, the medical society, as well as many citizen groups. Today, I have a deja vu feeling from that era, as there were many meetings in various communities as there are today. The key difference is that in those days, the government organized those meetings, listened to people, and sought outside opinion. Today, these meetings are community organized. And our elected leaders appear not to want to hear from us. For instance, our physicians group has asked twice, the second time in an open letter, that we would like to speak with the Premier, and we have not heard back from him. Physicians regard the health risks of uranium mining to be severe. Here is a story from Sept-Îles in Quebec from 2009. Mining companies started to explore for uranium in their area. When petitions failed to halt the exploration, 23 doctors in the community publicly announced that they were prepared to resign as a group and leave town if the project moved forward. They stated that the threat to their water supply posed too much risk to their families and communities. With 23 doctors representing a third of the area's physicians, their stance had significant weight, with the result that in 2013, Quebec imposed a moratorium on uranium mining. We are not against economic development, but development must be sustainable and leave behind no unacceptable health risks. Uranium mining is not sustainable. A given mine will last only 40 years, and its health risks would last for millennia. Uranium comes as a package along with its 15 decay or byproducts. Uranium starts the process by releasing a radioactive particle to produce another element, and so on, down to the last of 15 of that group, which is inert lead. All are toxic, and all but lead are radioactive. If one of these radioactive elements is ingested, a radioactive particle can be released in a cell and cause a subatomic explosion. I've heard it called a subatomic piece of shrapnel, which can cause damage to the contents of the cell, including its DNA, and lead to diseases and genetic problems. An example of one of the decayed products of uranium is radium, which acts like calcium in the body. In 1920s and 1930s, young women were hired to paint luminescent dials on watches with radium paint. They pointed their brushes in their mouths. Hence, they ingested a small amount of radium, which caused, for them, radon in your bloodstream. Uranium as itself, when ingested as in contaminated well water, acts as a heavy metal poisoning in the body and causes kidney, liver, and reproductive problems. These overshadow actually the radioactive effects of uranium. Digging or drilling holes in the ground where high concentrations of radium exist cause significant releases of radon gas. Radon gas is invisible, odorless, can't taste it, second leading cause of lung cancer after cigarette smoking. The risk of lung cancer increases proportionally with the amounts of radon. We know radon is present naturally from our rocks and soils, but mining companies state, without giving credible references, that there's a negligible amount of radon released with new mining techniques. In fact, I suspect they don't release it at all. Open pit uranium mining releases the most radon gas. Robotic underground mining, as is done for the very rich deposits in uranium, is indeed safer for the workers. They did learn from the experience in Elliott Lake, which we saw, where there were many of those miners died from lung cancer. Nova Scotia has low-grade ore, so likely robotic mining would not be feasible. In situ mining, which is being promoted as a new mining technique, is much like fracking, in that water with chemicals is injected into the ground with the intent of dissolving uranium. This type of mining has not been done in Canada, but in the US, this technique has led to aquifer contamination. And you have to remember, once an aquifer or water body is contaminated, it's extraordinarily difficult to restore that. So prevention is the key. Don't let it get contaminated. During exploration, water and air come in contact with uranium, causing uranium to dissolve, as we've already heard, and it becomes mobile. This is how it enters wells. If there were mining exploration, and we already heard about this in another flash flood from Millet Brook, Windsor area could potentially be flooded with uranium-contaminated water. After the ore is mined, it's ground up or milled on site. This process creates toxic radioactive dust particles which can be blown around or washed away, thus distributing the radioactivity into our environment and into the food chain. The waste in the tailings contain 85% of the total radioactivity removed from the mine. A continuous stream of radon gas will emanate from the tailings, as the tailings contain the radium which produces radon directly. Children living downwind from tailings are more susceptible to leukemia. And these tailings were made radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years, and the responsibility for a mine site falls to the province. Nova Scotia has been compared to Saskatchewan, which has 12 times the land area, with mines only occupying the northern part. There are no permanent mines, towns within 600 kilometers of the mines, and miners are actually flown into work, stay for 2-week stints. A First Nations group, the Dene, travel in some of those areas, subjected to the scatter of radon gas, and are subject to the negative health consequences of eating the caribou, which is eaten contaminated lichens. Radon can scatter hundreds of kilometers away, and in this way it enters the food chain, which is very important around here because it's an agricultural area. In Nova Scotia, we have the second densest population of any province, with 42% people dependent on wells. And in addition, we have a wetter, windier climate than Saskatchewan, thus scattering would be faster than in Saskatchewan. A few myths that somehow we would be better off from the effects of uranium if it were dug up and taken away. This is absolutely false. The safest place for uranium is to leave it alone, undisturbed, as much as possible. Myth 2, that new maps need to be made to show where uranium exists. In fact, as we've already heard, extensive mapping has already been done in the 1970 era. Myth 3, that we need to dig out more uranium for medical isotopes. In fact, no more uranium is necessary for medical purposes. Most radioactive isotopes used in medicine can be made in cyclotrons or particle accelerators and can be made without a radioactive source and without the need of a large nuclear power plant. Myth 4, that permissible levels of ionizing radiation are safe. In fact, harm caused by low-level ionizing radiation is poorly recognized, and there is disproportionate harm to women, children, and specifically the unborn. These levels were developed post-World War II using data from reference man. In other words, children and women were not included in their calculations. So it turns out that the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission uses this old data, and they do not use this newer data that shows the disproportionate effect on women and children. And especially you have to remember, when there's low-level radiation, it's going to cause excess miscarriages and it's going to cause congenital deformed babies. This is really important to remember. My conclusion is all uranium, once mined and processed, ends up as, after a short stint through nuclear power, it ends up as nuclear waste, nuclear weapons, that's a huge one still, and growing, unfortunately, and radioactive fallout. The conclusion, leave it in the ground, undisturbed, and where it causes the least amount of damage. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Elizabeth Costers, geologist and retired professor, up to do this presentation.
I'm going to sit down so I can see my own slides. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for these two excellent introductions. I have very much to add, but I will try to add a little bit better. I'm a geologist. I live in Wolfville. I have been, I've worked for geological surveys in the US, Netherlands, and Canada, and for universities. I'm not specifically a uranium expert. And I always give people the comparison as the Earth is like a human body. If you have a heart problem, you do not go see a dermatologist. In our case, if we have we look for a uranium specialist or for other geologists who may be sufficiently informed. This is not the skin, right? You still wouldn't go to, I don't know, a plumber. That's the same as for your heart problem. If you couldn't find a cardiologist, you still wouldn't go to a plumber. have some basic experience. So I am a geologist, but not a uranium expert, but I believe I have enough background knowledge to be able to give you some basic background information of what uranium in Nova Scotia looks like. This slide presentation has been loaded up to the website that incredibly smart folks have created, so you can download it from there if you want. Do I just hit right where I go? Oh, this one. So, about uranium. It is the heaviest element on Earth, on our planet. Every element consists of four with protons, positive charge, and neutrons surrounded by electrons. Its stable element, the balance, the charge is balanced. Uranium is unstable. It has a lot more neutrons and protons than the electrons, and the charge is not balanced. And in the process of becoming stable, uranium decays, what we call decays, by ejecting nuclei and electrons. This is what's called radioactivity. And in doing so, it becomes something else. And we've just heard about 40 steps actually in the slide. The complete uranium to lead chain of decay, and lead is stable, takes 4.5 billion years. And this means that after 4.5 billion years, half of the original, the half-life of uranium is 4.5 billion years. And so this means that after 4.5 billion years, half of all original uranium that was on the planet has decayed to lead, which is stable. And because Earth is 4.5 billion years, we need another 4.5 billion years before all radioactive uranium has decayed to lead. So we don't have another 4.5 billion years. But so it is a lifelong risk for all inhabitants of planet Earth. It becomes many different elements temporarily, and this has been mentioned. For a certain amount of time, it exists as radium, and for a certain amount of time, it exists as radon, and I won't go further into details because they've just been expertly explained. So radioactive uranium and radon are both abundant in Nova Scotia's bedrock and are well documented public health risks. So where does uranium occur originally? So this is a very simplified map of the granite rock bodies in Nova Scotia there in red. The granite is about 450 million years old, and it grows up from deep in the crust. The granite is the source of the uranium. But uranium, as we've heard, is very mobile, so it's also found further away from the granite. And how does it get there? So here's a cartoon. Granite is original Earth crust. It's this red blob with the little dots, little crosses. Again, this is a very simplified representation. Granite wells up from below during the very long time. It is not volcano. And granite is all silicate minerals, like sand. Uranium is a so-called lithophile element. It likes to attach itself to silicate minerals, which is almost all there is. And it likes to move to more preferred silicate minerals if it can. So it's very mobile in the Earth crust. So the next two images show how uranium migrated from the granite to the surrounding rock. Again, it is cartoon. So while the granite intruded in the overlying crust, the land rose and then eroded over millions of years, these little arrows. And the eroded sediment that came off the higher part of the land got redeposited in the surrounding areas. And the uranium that was originally in the granite moved with the eroded and redeposited sediment in the rocks surrounding the granite. And then everything eroded down, and you have a new land surface that is a granite body surrounded by sediments, secondarily enriched by uranium. That is our situation in a cartoonish manner. So both the granite and the surrounding rocks contain uranium and its decay products, and this explains the distribution. In Nova Scotia, it also explains why potential, God forbid, mining technology would be very different. So here again on the left is the granite body as I first showed it, in a very simplistic version. And on the right is a map by the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources showing the different types of uranium in Nova Scotia. So around the granite body, you have these red dots, granite vein type. And there are other types. And most importantly, the yellow squares are so-called rolls rock. The granite vein type and the rolls rock are important for current 3 licenses that are still closed, but that the government opens for exploration and then no bidding. Only those 2 types can work. So what are the mining methods for uranium? So that depends on where uranium occurs. Does it occur in the original granite body? Does it occur in so-called wolfram? And we see what wolfram looks like. So the uranium in the granite body is distributed in a different way than in the sedimentary rocks surrounding the granite. In the granite, which is a little bit east now, the uranium is distributed along preferential mineral paths in the granite. The granite is not homogeneous at all. In the sedimentary rocks, the mountains, uranium is present in the so-called wolfram. So this is why the mining methods would be different. On the granite, it would likely be open pit mining, and the risk is open pit mining. Dust, surface water pollution, detrimental effects of the food chain. Definitely devastating. In the sedimentary rocks, it would likely be solution mining, so large industrial complex with risks of groundwater contamination, as we just heard. So here's an example in bedrock. So this is not how it looks here, this is how it looks in Australia, but in our subsurface, it would look comparatively. Since it's a so-called wolfram, there's a hammer scale. This is in Australia. And you can see this colored rock with the blue line drawn around it. The blue line is drawn on the side. The rock, darker here, colored. This is where the uranium is. Remember, the uranium is mobile. It likes to attach itself and will moves through the sediment body, which is contained between 2 other rock bodies. So note how fractured this rock is. It's not homogeneous. This is normal. This slide comes from a uranium mining information site in Australia. So, key facts about Canadian uranium. Canada is the second largest producer and exporter of uranium in the world. 15% global production in 2022. Almost all of it comes from Saskatchewan. Nuclear power generation accounted for approximately 14% of Canadian electricity in 2021. Canada has developed its own reactor, the Canada reactor, which, never mind everything, but that's a great thing. There are 18 reactors in Ontario, one of them and 11 operations outside Canada. And under Canada's non-nuclear non-proliferation policy, Canadian uranium can be used only for peaceful purposes. Except when you're exporting, you know that they will. In 2022, 18% of Canada's uranium production was exported for use in power generated throughout the world. If our own supply of uranium for nuclear energy would be threatened, all we have to do is stop the export. We have plenty enough in northern Saskatchewan. So here is a very simplistic map of northern Saskatchewan. It's a total map of Google Earth, and the area in where the uranium mines in northern Saskatchewan is outlined in this oval. 200 by 100 kilometers, more or less. The average, and this was referred to already, the average rainfall here is about 350 millimeters per year. Uranium is mobile, so it's less mobile in a dry climate. So this wildlife attach itself to moving particles. If it's very dry climate, less sediment moves around, less sediment gets eroded. The northern Saskatchewan uranium deposits here are of the highest possible quality in the world. And I do have a number for the Nova Scotia uranium quality, but I can't find the original source. So I can't quote it here, I'm hunting. But in the 90s, it was quoted as a quality of much, much, much less than the Saskatchewan uranium quality, which means that you have exponentially more waste, which is radioactive. But again, I have to find the original source. The uranium Saskatchewan mines are in almost uninhabited, at least by people territory. The only settlement is the indigenous community of Hatchet Lake, Wilson Lake, population of 1,700 somewhere here. The citizens of Hatchet Lake, Wilson Lake cannot hunt for fish because of the high level of radioactivity in the biota. If we put this same scale on Nova Scotia, 235 kilometers, we have a million people, more or less. We're the second most densely populated province in Canada. The rainfall is about 3 times as high as in northern Saskatchewan, so it's a much higher risk for uranium that is released from it to become more mobile and more risky. We've talked about this in a moment. Here's a report from the Nova Scotia government. It's a 2020 report about uranium in well water. Of course, many of Nova Scotians have wells. Please, if your wells are tested for uranium and for radon, and your basements for radon. This report is available online. You can explore it at your own time. About 26,000, this is a recent report. About 26,445 private wells are in high-risk area, high-risk uranium area. In drinking water, the chemical properties of uranium are a greater concern than in radioactivity. The drinking water, uranium in drinking water has different health as well. Elevated levels of uranium in drinking water and kidneys. The overall percentage of private well water exceeding safe drinking water limits in Nova Scotia may be as high as 6.5%. About 25,000 Nova Scotians are exposed to too much uranium in their well water. Uranium levels in drinking water are on average, between 0.05 and 0.83 milligrams per liter, whereas the Canadian guideline is 0.002. So please check your wells. And this report, again, is reviewed. And for a quick illustration about radon, this is from the radon list book, which you can also examine online. Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources has excellent lists here. This is the same outline as the granite body, this brown blob. It is the same, and the highest risk of radon exposure is directly related to that granite body. So radon is a uranium decay product. It occurs throughout Nova Scotia, especially those close to granite bodies. It's a public health risk. It accumulates in poorly ventilated areas, basements, and exposure to it increases risk of blood and throat cancer. I'm sorry, I'm repeating. This is part of the this is part of the Nova Scotia radon risk map, and you can also examine this online at your own. All three available from the Department of Natural Resources. So, why this push? To consider all of this, why this push for uranium in Nova Scotia now? It makes no sense from a geological perspective. My personal interpretation is that it is all because of global political instability. In early June, the uranium price in the stock market rose to 71, that's high, $71.9 per pound. As the possibility of political support for the nuclear sector outweighed the view of ample supply. Trump signed an order, he was named, shall not be mentioned, to cut regulations and accelerate licenses for nuclear reactors or power plants. This measure leads to a growing demand for uranium. The Trump administration is supportive of the nuclear sector. It paved the way for tech companies to use nuclear power to sustain power-hungry data centers, especially ChatGPT, turn it off, and Bitcoin, in which Trump himself is invested, require vast amounts of energy. But they don't have it themselves, they have to import it. They have some. I mean, they're mining more, but it takes these things. Lack of clarity on future tough tariffs on uranium imports from Canada and Pakistan maintains the stress on the limited U.S. capacity. The U.S. imports a large portion of uranium from Pakistan, which pays us tariffs of 27%, and Canada 10%. He's shooting himself in the foot, but it's not our problem. That's quoted, this is not my idea, and the quote, you can quote. So why I think we should not allow uranium exploration in Nova Scotia has to do with the fact that we're not a political football, right, a Duke down the border. We have to look for the interest, the health and benefit of the generations of Nova Scotia in the future. Whatever your position is on uranium mining in general, you don't need to say, oh my goodness, I actually think uranium with nuclear power is a solution to climate change. You can say that, that's no problem. There's definitely arguments for that, but it does not mean you should support uranium mining in Nova Scotia because there's no economic need whatsoever to start looking at this resource, given that we have this massive, the world's largest, highest quality resource in unpopulated country. So our energy security is not at risk, and that's independent of your opinion of uranium as an energy source. We're also in a biodiversity crisis. You no longer need to clean your windshield. The bugs are gone. We all know this. We have over-exhausted the natural environment, and we as humans depend on it. And while acknowledging that we need Earth resources for 6 billion people, we must also protect our own habitat. This is in our own interest. And be more selective than we have been about where we mine and what we actually need. We should not let the stock market decide our needs. And the Earth exploration has basically gone that way. Geologists get excited and oh, I found a resource. Guess what? We might find something really good quality. We're going to get it out of the ground. That's history. We should really become a little bit more balanced. So therefore, this is the idea of Edward Wilson, who was one of the world's greatest life scientists, who was at Harvard, passed away a few years ago. He developed this concept, path first. And he said, yes, we acknowledge that there were 6 billion people, but we can still protect half the Earth in our own interests so that we as people can continue to survive. Because if we go on the way we do, then we as a species will simply go extinct. So we should strive towards protecting half the Earth in our own interests. The Saskatchewan was in this particular context. The Saskatchewan Reserve is more than big enough. Mining uranium in Nova Scotia will not improve understanding of public health issues. That groundwater uranium report was produced 4 years ago. Those researchers had all the access they needed to all the information they needed. It's not like they couldn't do research because there was a ban. You can do research. You should always do research. It won't provide long-lasting jobs, we know that. No mining ever does, which is contract group for a few years without benefits, and then they close the hole and they're gone. And it will never make a meaningful contribution to Canada's energy security. And I want to leave it there. Thank you.
Their piece of property, they've owned it since the land grant days. Their family's owned it that long, so it's been a fairly long time. It's the biggest parcel of land in the RFP area. It was just recently approached, not by the DNR, but by our local MLA, Winsor Information Session. There's quite a lot of media publicity on it, and they've been very good standing the ground and supporting and standing up for what's theirs and for this community. So I would like to he's going to say a few words.
I'm nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room for a rocking chair right now. But we have to protect the land that was left to us by our ancestors. When I got the call, it was sick, it's for your own safety, it's for your own safety. And I said, yes, I'm pretty sure that that's what took my dad at a tender young age of 94. Being around this stuff, and it's in the ground. I can list so many people, Harold Lyle, they all look to be in their 90s, and they ate the fish, and they ate the game, and they drank the water from the brooks. And our whole community, there's so many people that lived to be in late 80s and 90s, my grandparents. Back then, they didn't have bottled water. They drank their well water. And when they was working in the woods, they drank the water. This is, I don't know why they're doing this to us. Our province is absolutely beautiful. The land and home is beautiful. There's so many lakes, so many streams, so many waterways. And as you know, water all runs downhill. It's going to go somewhere. We have to stop this, and not stop just this little project. We have to have the moratorium put back on it. I'm going to fight to the bitter end for this, and my family is as well. I have 7 children and 16 grandchildren. I want them to grow up like I did, being able to go and enjoy it. I mean, if they have and we're in a snow belt up there as well. It's not just a big storm, rainstorm that comes to do this. Back in the 80s, we had a lot of snow and we had a big freshen in the spring, and it would be the same thing. And everything was flooded. So as you know, we get more snow up there, even in a regular year. So we cannot allow this to happen to our province. Not just our community, our province is too small for this. And there's just no ifs, ands, or buts. We have to stop this. And I'm here to the bitter end. I'm going to go to jail over this. And they can come and do this. And in the words of Aaron Tippin, you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. Now, let's stand up and do this together. Thank you very much.
That was amazing. Thank you. And Courtney Morrison from Council of Canadians would like to say a few words, and then we're going to have a question and answer period. Thank you.
I'm also a little bit nervous, so I'm going to sit. Luckily, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Big thanks to Sarah and Pat for organizing this event. As she mentioned, my name is Courtney. I work for Council of Canadians, which is a national organization that has taken action on social and environmental issues for 40 years. I have a background in political organizing as well as environmental permitting. The decision to lift the ban on uranium exploration and mining is deeply concerning and anti-democratic. The Uranium Exploration and Mining Prohibition Act was not lazy policy, as Premier Houston claimed. It was the result of years of environmental advocacy and community organizing by Nova Scotians who understood the risks. This decision was not just an environmental misstep, it was an act of executive overreach. Our government is supposed to work for us, but they are prioritizing corporate speculation over public will. Just to reiterate what Sarah said earlier, really want to encourage folks to call, write, and meet with your MLA. Right now, the focus is on our provincial government because this ban has been lifted, but that will change. This week, Bill C5 was passed, which will expedite environmental environmental assessment and approval process for projects considered to have national interest. So this is a black box of decision making, and it's quite problematic. Yeah, so I want to encourage folks to talk to organizers about how you can get involved. Sarah and Chad, Colby, other local organizers have been doing so much, and they need all of our help.